Toy Simone, sometimes a person's greatest strength is measured not by what they conquer, but by what they endure without losing their essence. Rain hammered against the windows of the Blue Sea restaurant like small fists demanding entry. Inside the establishment, warm lights created a perfect contrast with the storm outside, illuminating immaculate white tablecloths and crystal glasses that reflected the flames of candles. It was one of those nights when customers arrived drenched but smiling, seeking refuge in good food and a welcoming atmosphere. Among the tables, a young woman moved with peculiar grace, adapting each step to the weight she carried in her womb. 6 months of pregnancy hadn't stopped Sofia Mendez, though her swollen legs protested at the end of each shift and her feet begged for rest. At 23 years old, her face retained delicate features that exhaustion hadn't completely erased. She had honey-colored eyes, deep as ancient wells, and chestnut hair pulled back in a practical ponytail that revealed the determination of someone who has no time for vanities. She carried a tray with 3 pasta au gratin dishes when she felt the familiar kick of her baby. She smiled involuntarily, that automatic gesture that imminent motherhood had given her. Each movement of the creature inside her was a reminder of why she endured the endless shifts, the pitying looks from some customers, the whispers of those who judged without knowing her story. "Here you are. Folks," she said with a soft but clear voice, placing the plates in front of an elderly couple who had been her favorite customers for months. "I hope you enjoy it." "Thank you, dear," the elderly woman responded, briefly touching Sofia's hand with maternal warmth. "How are you feeling today? Is the little one letting you sleep?" "A bit restless lately," Sofia admitted, caressing her belly. "I think he'll be a soccer player." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of the main door opening forcefully. A group of 4 men entered the restaurant, shaking their wet coats, without caring about the water splashing the floor. At the front came a man of approximately 45 years, tall with an athletic build carefully maintained at expensive gyms. He wore a charcoal grey suit that probably cost more than 3 months of Sofia's rent, and his hair was slicked back with gel, revealing angular features that might have been attractive if they weren't perpetually tense with arrogance. It was Sebastian Duarte, heir and CEO of the Duarte Group, a business conglomerate with interests in construction, importing, and real estate. Everyone in the restaurant knew who he was. His face appeared frequently in the business pages of local newspapers, always with the same expression of calculated smugness. Lucia Rojas, the manager of Blue Sea, practically ran from her desk to receive him. She was a 50-year-old woman, thin as a reed, with hair dyed platinum blonde that contrasted harshly with her artificially tanned skin. She had spent 15 years managing the restaurant and had perfected the art of flattering important customers while keeping the staff in line. "Mr. Duarte, what an honor to have you with us again," she exclaimed with a smile so wide it seemed painful. "I have the perfect table for you and your guests." Sebastian didn't even look at her, busy responding to a message on his latest model phone. With a vague wave of his hand, he indicated for her to lead the way. Lucia led them to the central table of the hall, the most visible one, the one that guaranteed everyone could admire whoever occupied it. It was precisely what Sebastian Duarte sought: to be seen, to be recognized, to dominate the space with his mere presence. Sofia observed the scene from her position near the kitchen, feeling an inexplicable chill run down her spine. There was something about that man that she found disturbing, a coldness in his eyes that didn't correspond with his professional smile when he finally put down his phone and greeted his partners with slaps on the shoulder. "Sofia," Lucia called her with an imperious tone, "attend to Mr. Duarte's table, and please do your best." The young woman's heart accelerated. She had learned to read the nuances in her boss's voice, and that please wasn't a courtesy, but a veiled warning. She took a deep breath, smoothed her black apron over her prominent belly, and walked toward the table with the best smile she could compose. "Good evening, gentlemen," she said with a clear voice when she reached the table. "My name is Sofia, and I'll have the pleasure of serving you tonight. May I offer you something to drink while you review the menu?" Sebastian Duarte didn't even look up. He was back on his phone, his thumb frantically swiping across the screen. His partners looked at her briefly and ordered mineral water and red wine, But the businessman remained absorbed in his device. Sophia waited. A full minute. Then 2. She could feel how her feet swelled inside the black shoes that were already too tight due to pregnancy water retention. The baby kicked, as if protesting having to stand for so long. She discreetly shifted her weight from one leg to another, trying to relieve the pressure. Finally, when almost 3 minutes of uncomfortable silence had passed, Sebastian put away his phone with an exaggerated sigh of annoyance. He looked up at Sophia, and for the first time his eyes scanned her figure from top to bottom. His gaze stopped at her swollen belly, and something dark crossed his face. It wasn't exactly disgust, but something worse. Contempt mixed with an absolute lack of empathy. "Whiskey," he said dryly, without greeting, without a "please," without the slightest recognition that he was speaking to another human being. "Double, no ice. And make it the brand I know you keep for special clients, not the garbage you normally serve." "Right away, sir," Sophia responded, maintaining her professional tone, though she felt the sting of humiliation. When she returned with the drinks, carefully balanced on her tray, Sebastian was in the middle of a phone conversation about a multi-million-dollar business merger. He spoke loudly, deliberately, making sure everyone in the restaurant could hear figures that probably exceeded the GDP of small countries. "3 million now, 5 more when the deal closes. I don't accept less, Carlos. You know my time is worth gold," he was saying as Sophia carefully placed his whiskey in front of him. She retreated discreetly, waiting for the appropriate moment to take his food order. But Sebastian continued his call, ignoring her completely. Another 5 minutes passed. Sophia could feel the worried gaze of the elderly couple she had served earlier, could sense how other diners looked away, uncomfortable at the scene. When Sebastian finally ended his call, Sophia approached again. "Are you ready to order, gentlemen?" Sebastian picked up the menu for the first time, flipping through it with an expression of supreme boredom. "I want the salmon," he said, "but without that dill sauce that normally comes with it. Make it lemon sauce and the vegetables steamed but crispy, not soft. The mashed potatoes, without butter, just extra virgin olive oil. And the salad, make it only arugula, no common lettuce." Sophia jotted quickly, accustomed to special orders. "Perfect, sir. Any other preferences?" "Wait." He stopped her, reviewing the menu again. "Actually, make it the steak. Medium but not pink in the center, but not too cooked either. And instead of chimichurri, just sea salt and freshly ground black pepper." Sophia mentally erased the first order and noted the second. "Understood, sir. A medium steak—" "No, wait," he interrupted again, this time with evident irritation. "The salmon sounds better, but change the steamed vegetables for roasted vegetables without oil, just herbs, and add an extra plate of asparagus." Sophia felt tension accumulating in her shoulders. She took a deep breath. "So it will be the salmon with the modifications you mentioned first, plus roasted vegetables and additional asparagus." "Aren't you listening to me?" Sebastian snapped, raising his voice enough for nearby tables to quiet their conversations. "I said I wanted the steak. Do you have some comprehension problem, or is it that in your condition you can't concentrate properly?" The silence that followed was dense, almost tangible. Sophia felt heat rising to her face, but she maintained her composure. She had faced cruel comments before, had survived judgmental looks and hurtful words, but there was something particularly venomous in the way this man used her pregnancy as a weapon, as if her condition made her less capable, less human. "Excuse me, sir," she said, with a firm but courteous voice. "I confirm then. Medium steak, no pink but not too cooked, only sea salt and black pepper, roasted vegetables without oil, and additional asparagus." "That's what I said from the beginning," Sebastian muttered, returning the menu with a brusque gesture. "I thought this place had standards, Lucia," he added, addressing the manager who had appeared as if by magic upon detecting the conflict. "Is this the type of staff you hire now?" The humiliation was complete, public, deliberate, and in that moment, as Sophia held her tray against her belly like a protective shield, something changed in the restaurant's atmosphere. A young man at a nearby table had discreetly taken out his mobile phone. The camera was recording. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one that was about to be unleashed. Sophia's apartment was located on the fourth floor of a building from the 70s that had seen better days. The exterior walls showed humidity stains that the owners never bothered to repair, and the elevator had been out of order for 2 years. But it was what she could afford, and at least it had large windows that let in sunlight during the mornings. It was 3 a.m. when Sophia finally crossed the door, dropping her bag on the small inherited sofa from her mother. Her feet were so swollen she had to take off her shoes sitting on the floor, unable to reach them from a normal position. The baby moved restlessly, probably annoyed by the hours spent standing. "I'm sorry, little one," she murmured, caressing her belly. "Tomorrow will be better. It's always better." But she wasn't sure she believed it. She collapsed on the sofa, too tired to change clothes or prepare something to eat. The scene at the restaurant replayed in her mind like a looping movie. The way Sebastian Duarte had looked at her, as if she were something unpleasant he had accidentally stepped on. The public humiliation. Lucia's intervention, who instead of defending her, had apologized profusely to the customer and sent her to the kitchen for the rest of the night. Her phone vibrated. It was a message from her mother, Elena Mendez. "Daughter, did you arrive safely? Eat something before sleeping. I love you." Sophia smiled weakly. Her mother always worried, even at 3 a.m. Elena worked as a cleaning employee at a hotel chain, night shifts that allowed her to earn a little more. At 53 years old, her body showed the marks of decades of hard work, knees that creaked when climbing stairs, hands roughened by cleaning chemicals, a back that never stopped hurting completely. But her eyes maintained an unbreakable sweetness, an unconditional love for her daughter that had been the only constant in Sophia's life. "Arrived safely, Mum. You rest too. We'll talk tomorrow." She lied about eating. She didn't have the strength to get up. She closed her eyes, seeking the escape of sleep, but her mind wandered to the past, to memories she preferred to keep buried. She had met Diego Salazar in her first year of college. He was studying business administration, she nursing. They met in the library when both reached for the same book on basic psychology from opposite angles. It was a movie-like encounter, or so Sophia believed in her 19-year-old naivety. Diego was handsome in a conventional way, athletic, easy smile, the kind of guy who knew exactly what to say to make a girl feel special. For 6 months, he was the perfect boyfriend. Modest dinners that he insisted on paying for, walks in the park, promises of a future together. Sophia fell completely in love. It was her first real love, and she gave not only her heart, but also her absolute trust. When Diego asked for her credit card for a family emergency, she didn't hesitate. When the emergency repeated 3 more times, Sophia began to suspect, but love kept her blind. She discovered the truth in the most brutal way. She went to the apartment Diego shared with 2 college roommates, using the key he had given her as a symbol of commitment. She found him in the living room with a blonde girl Sophia recognized from faculty parties. They weren't doing anything inappropriate, but the way Diego laughed, the intimacy of his body language was enough. The confrontation was brief and devastating. "You mean nothing," Diego told her with a coldness Sophia had never seen in him. "You were convenient. I needed money, and you were stupid enough to give it to me." Sophia discovered she had accumulated almost $8,000 in debt. Diego had used her card to buy brand-name clothes, pay off sports bets, buy drinks for friends. When she demanded he return the money, he simply shrugged. "Prove it," he said with a cruel smile. "Prove that you didn't spend that money yourself." There was no proof. Diego had always been careful, using the card personally, mixing purchases for her with purchases for himself, and Sophia, humiliated and broken, didn't have the courage to report him to the authorities. But the real bomb exploded 3 weeks after that breakup. 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test. Sophia called Diego from her apartment bathroom, her hands shaking so much she could barely hold the phone. He answered after the 5th ring, his voice annoyed. "What do you want? I thought we were done." "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed was so deep that Sophia checked the screen to make sure the call hadn't dropped. "That's not my problem," Diego finally said, his voice cold as ice. "It's your child," Sophia whispered, feeling tears beginning to fall. "Can you prove it? Because for all I know, it could be anyone's. You decided to sleep with me. Now deal with the consequences." "Diego, please." Don't call me again. If you try to accuse me of anything, I'll destroy you. My father has lawyers who will leave you on the street, and believe me, no one will believe you over me." The call ended. Sophia slid down the bathroom wall until she was sitting on the cold floor, hugging her knees against her chest. She cried until she had no tears left, until only dry, empty sobs remained. In that dark moment, she contemplated options she never imagined she would consider. But then she felt something, a subtle flutter in her belly, so faint she almost didn't perceive it. It was too early for real movements, probably just her imagination. But it was enough for something to change inside her. She placed a hand on her still flat stomach. "It's okay," she murmured. "You and me against the world, little one. We're going to be okay." That decision led her to temporarily abandon university. She couldn't pay for classes while working enough to cover debts and prepare for the baby. She got the job at Blue Sea through an ad in the local newspaper. Lucia Rojas hired her reluctantly, making clear that pregnancy would not be an excuse for underperformance. For 5 months, Sophia proved to be the best employee at the restaurant. She arrived early, stayed late, never complained. Customers adored her for her genuine kindness, for the way she remembered their names and favorite orders. The tips she received were generous, and every cent went directly into an envelope marked "baby" that she kept in her nightstand drawer. But she also worked night shifts at a laundromat, folding hotel sheets until her hands ached. And on weekends, she cleaned houses with her mother, though Elena begged her to rest more. "I can't rest, Mom," Sophia would tell her. "Every day I don't work is one less day of preparation for when the baby arrives." Elena Mendez looked at her daughter with a mixture of pride and sadness. She recognized that iron determination, that refusal to give up in the face of circumstances. It was the same she had had 30 years ago when she found herself alone, pregnant, and without resources. Because there was a secret Elena had never fully told Sophia, a secret about the past, about the years she worked in an elegant mansion on the outskirts of the city, caring for a spoiled child whose family exploited her mercilessly. That secret was about to emerge from the shadows, bringing with it truths that would change everything. The video lasted exactly 47 seconds, but it was enough to capture the complete essence of humiliation. It began with Sophia's approach to the table, her prominent belly clearly visible. The audio perfectly captured Sebastian Duarte's voice, changing his order 3 times, the growing irritation in his tone. Then came the crucial moment, when he raised his voice, asking if she had comprehension problems or if in her condition she couldn't concentrate properly. The camera captured Sophia's face in that instant, the pain in her honey-colored eyes, the way her hands tensed around the notepad, the almost imperceptible trembling in her lower lip that she contained with willpower. And it also captured Sebastian's cruel smile, the way his partners laughed among themselves, uncomfortable but complicit. The young man who recorded the video uploaded it to his social networks at 3 in the morning, adding only one sentence: "This happened tonight at Blue Sea. Is this how you treat a pregnant woman working honestly?" By the time Sophia woke up at 7 in the morning, the video already had 50,000 views. By 10, 200,000. At noon, 500,000. By afternoon, the video had crossed digital borders, being shared in mothers' groups, workers' forums, social justice pages. Comments numbered in the thousands. "I know that girl, she works harder than anyone. Shame on that man. Typical businessman who thinks money gives him the right to treat others badly. My sister went through something similar. It's time these abusers face consequences. Does anyone know who the man in the grey suit is? We need to expose him." It didn't take long. The digital community was efficient when it came to identifying faces. Within hours, Sebastian Duarte's full name was circulating freely, along with information about his company, his businesses, even photos of his wife and his mansion in the hills. The scandal had begun. Sophia found out about the video when she arrived at the restaurant for her afternoon shift. The receptionist, a young girl named Martina who had always been kind to her, ran to meet her as soon as she crossed the door. "Sophia, you have to see this," she exclaimed, extending her phone with trembling hands. At first, Sophia didn't understand what she was seeing. It was herself on the screen, but the perspective was strange, like seeing herself through someone else's eyes. Then she heard Sebastian Duarte's voice, and the memory of the previous night returned with brutal force. She felt her knees weaken. She leaned against the nearest wall, trying to process what this meant. Thousands of people had seen her worst moment. Her humiliation was no longer private, it was public, permanent, recorded forever in the vast archive of the internet. "Everyone supports you," Martina said quickly, misinterpreting Sophia's paleness as fear. "Look at the comments, people are on your side." But Sophia didn't feel relief. She felt exposure, vulnerability, as if someone had opened her chest and exposed her beating heart to the world's scrutiny. "Where's Lucia?" she asked with a weak voice. "In her office. She's been receiving calls all morning, reporters, customers, everything." Sophia walked toward the manager's office with slow steps, as if advancing toward her own execution. She knocked on the door and entered without waiting for an answer. Lucia Rojas was sitting behind her desk, the landline phone pressed to her ear, her face more tense than Sophia had ever seen her. When she saw the young woman, her eyes narrowed. "I'll call you back," she said brusquely into the phone and hung up. "Sit down." Sophia obeyed, her hands clasped over her belly in a protective gesture that had become automatic. "I suppose you already saw the video," Lucia began, her tone accusatory, as if Sophia had been responsible for recording it. "I just found out. This is a disaster. A complete disaster." Lucia stood up, pacing back and forth in the small office. "Mr. Duarte called personally this morning. He's furious. He's threatening to sue the restaurant for... She made a vague gesture with her hands. "Invasion of privacy or something like that." "I didn't record anything," Sophia said firmly. "I didn't even know someone was filming." "That doesn't matter. What matters is that now this place is at the center of a media scandal. We've received dozens of calls, reporters wanting interviews, customers canceling reservations because they don't want to be associated with the restaurant from the video, others making reservations specifically to see you." Sophia blinked, confused. "To see me?" "Yes, to see you. As if you were a spectacle." Lucia sat back down, massaging her temples. "Look, Sophia, you're a good worker. You always have been, but this is too much. I need you to take a few days off while this calms down." "I can't afford days off," Sophia responded, feeling panic climbing up her throat. "I need to work. I have bills to pay. The baby will arrive in 3 months and—" "It's not a suggestion," Lucia interrupted coldly. "It's an order. Take the rest of the week. We'll see how things are on Monday." It was a dismissal disguised as leave, and both knew it. Sophia left the office with trembling legs. In the main dining room, several waiters looked at her with a mixture of compassion and morbid curiosity. She headed straight for the exit, ignoring the looks, concentrating only on reaching the street without falling apart. The fresh afternoon air hit her like a slap. She leaned against the restaurant wall, breathing deeply, trying to contain the tears that threatened to overflow. "Excuse me, Sophia Mendez." She turned to find a woman of about 35 years old, dressed professionally in black pants and a white blouse. Dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. She carried a small recorder in one hand and a notepad in the other. A few meters behind her, a cameraman adjusted his equipment. "I'm Carolina Vega, journalist from Channel 7 News. Could I speak with you for a few minutes about what happened last night?" "No, I don't want to talk to anyone," Sophia stammered, beginning to walk away. "I understand it must be difficult," Carolina said with a soft but persistent voice, walking beside her. "But your story is resonating with thousands of people, working women, single mothers, everyone who has been humiliated by figures of power. You have the opportunity to give voice to all of them." "I just want this to disappear," Sophia responded, quickening her pace. "It's not going to disappear." Carolina stopped, allowing Sophia to put distance between them, but raised her voice enough for her to hear. "The video is already out there. The story is already being told. The question is, do you want others to speak for you, or do you prefer to tell your own version?" Sophia stopped. The journalist's words resonated with something deep inside her. For months she had been silenced. By Diego, who ordered her not to speak about his paternity. By circumstances which forced her to accept jobs where her voice didn't matter. By the system itself, which seemed designed to make people like her invisible. But now she had an opportunity to be heard. She slowly turned toward Carolina Vega. "What exactly do you want to know?" Ana Sebastián Duarte's mansion rose in the hills like a temple dedicated to excess. 3 floors of modern architecture, all glass and steel, with an infinity pool that seemed to spill toward the ocean in the distance. The garden was meticulously designed, every shrub trimmed with millimetric precision, every flower selected to create a perfect color scheme. Inside that aesthetic perfection, however, a storm had begun. Valentina Herrera de Duarte had seen the video at 9 in the morning. A friend had sent it to her by private message with just a horrified face emoji. At first, Valentina thought it would be another one of those accident or embarrassing situation videos circulating online. She wasn't prepared to see her husband on the screen. She had been married to Sebastian for 15 years. They met at a charity gala organized by the city's yacht club. She was 25 years old, daughter of a retired diplomat, and had grown up in elegant social circles where appearance was more important than substance. Sebastian, then 30 years old and newly heir to his family's business empire, seemed like the perfect match. Successful, charismatic, ambitious. The first years were good, or at least that's what Valentina told herself. They lived well, traveled constantly, attended events where they were admired and envied. But over time she began to notice things. The way Sebastian spoke to domestic staff, as if they were less than human. His obsession with maintaining an impeccable public image. Degrading comments about people he considered inferior. Valentina had learned to ignore these signs, to rationalize her husband's behavior as a product of business stress or social pressure. But the video was different. It was impossible to rationalize. She watched how her husband, the man with whom she shared her life, deliberately humiliated a pregnant young woman who was just trying to do her job. She saw the casual cruelty in his eyes, the total absence of empathy. And for the first time in 15 years, Valentina allowed herself to admit something she had kept buried in the deepest part of her consciousness. She didn't really know who the man she was married to was. Sebastian arrived home around 7 in the evening, his face a mask of barely contained irritation. He had spent the day dealing with calls from his public relations department, crisis meetings with his lawyers, and increasingly alarming messages from business partners concerned about negative publicity. He found Valentina in the main living room, sitting on one of the white leather sofas they had imported from Italy. She held a glass of red wine, her eyes fixed on the window overlooking the illuminated pool. "Valentina," he said, loosening his tie. "It's been a hellish day. I hope at least here I can have some peace." She didn't respond immediately. She took a sip of her wine, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. "I saw the video, sir," she finally said, her voice dangerously calm. Sebastian exhaled with exasperation. "Of course you saw it. The whole damn country saw it. It's a setup, obviously. That girl probably orchestrated the whole thing to extort me. I'm sure a lawsuit demanding money will arrive soon." "A setup?" Valentina slowly turned to look at him, her dark eyes shining with something Sebastian didn't immediately recognize. It was anger, but deeper, colder. "Are you saying that video was edited, that you didn't say all those things?" "You're taking everything out of context," Sebastian responded, walking toward the bar to pour himself a whiskey. "I was having a bad day. The girl was incompetent. She wasn't paying attention. If she can't handle the pressure of working with the public, she should look for another job. She's 6 months pregnant. And that's not my problem." Sebastian drank his whiskey in one gulp. "Look, I understand this looks bad, but that's the real world, Valentina. Not everyone deserves a pat on the back and a participation trophy. People need to learn their place." "Their place." Valentina repeated the words slowly, as if tasting them. "Like the domestic employee we have, like the gardener, like everyone who serves you." "Exactly." Sebastian looked at her as if she was finally understanding something obvious. "Each person has a role in society. Some lead, others follow, some command, others obey. It's always been this way, it will always be this way." Valentina stood up with slow movements, leaving her wineglass on the coffee table. "And where am I in that hierarchy, Sebastian? Am I one of those who lead or one of those who obey?" The question caught him off guard. For the first time in the conversation, Sebastian hesitated. "You're my wife, you're different." "Different how? Because I come from an acceptable family. Because I can put on an expensive dress and smile in photos at charity galas." "Valentina, you're being dramatic. This isn't the time to—" "I want to know who your parents really were," she interrupted, her voice now firm, demanding. "Not the idealized versions you present in public. I want to know how they built this fortune. I want to see employee records from 30, 40 years ago." Sebastian's face hardened. "Why the hell would you want to see that?" "Because something doesn't add up." Valentina walked toward him, planting herself directly in front of her husband. "I've heard rumors for years, things I ignored because it was easier not to ask questions. But that video, the way you treated that girl, made me think, if you're like this in public, what is your family like in private? What did they do to the people who worked for them?" "My family built an empire with hard work and smart decisions," Sebastian responded, his voice rising in volume. "I won't allow you to insinuate otherwise." "Then prove it. Show me the records. Show me that everything was legitimate, that they treated their employees well, that there's nothing to hide." Sebastian gripped his empty glass so hard Valentina feared it would break. "I don't have to prove anything to you," he said slowly, each word loaded with implicit threat. "You're my wife. You're supposed to be on my side, not interrogating me like I'm a criminal." "I'm on your side when you deserve me to be," Valentina responded, holding his gaze without blinking. "But that video showed me something that scares me, Sebastian. It showed me that maybe I never really knew you." For a moment, something passed across Sebastian's face. It could have been doubt, it could have been fear, or perhaps a flash of awareness that his carefully constructed world was beginning to crumble. But the moment passed quickly, replaced by the mask of arrogance he knew so well. "Do what you want," he finally said, leaving the glass on the bar with a sharp thud. "Review the old records if it makes you feel better. You won't find anything because there's nothing to find." He left the room, his steps echoing on the marble floor. Valentina heard him climb the stairs to his private office on the 3rd floor, where he spent more and more time. When she was sure he wouldn't return, Valentina took out her phone and searched for the video again. This time she focused on the young waitress, on her tired but dignified eyes, on the way she protected her belly, even while maintaining professional composure, on the silent strength emanating from someone who had learned to survive in a world that constantly tried to crush her. And Valentina made a decision. She was going to find out the truth no matter what that truth revealed, about the family she had entered 15 years ago. The Channel 7 news studio was smaller than Sophia had imagined. The bright lights made her squint, and the microphone attached to her blouse felt heavy, strange. She was sitting on a sky-blue sofa facing Carolina Vega, who was reviewing her notes with a concentrated expression. 2 days had passed since the viral video, 2 days in which Sophia had barely slept, harassed by reporters at her building, flooded with messages on social networks she had activated for the first time in months. Most were supportive, but some were cruel, accusing her of taking advantage of the situation, of having deliberately provoked Sebastian Duarte. She had finally agreed to this interview after her mother convinced her. "Daughter, you have an opportunity to tell your story in your own words," Elena had told her the night before, sitting together on the small apartment sofa. "Don't let others define who you are." Now, under the studio lights, Sophia wasn't so sure. "Breathe," Carolina said softly, noticing the tension in the young woman's body. "This isn't an interrogation. I just want you to share your truth. Ready?" Sophia nodded, placing her hands on her belly in that protective gesture that had become second nature. The cameras began recording. "Good evening," Carolina began with her professional presenter voice. "I'm here with Sofia Mendez, the young woman who has become the center of a national debate about labor dignity and treatment of workers. Sophia, thank you for being here." "Thank you for having me," Sophia responded, her voice softer than she had planned. "Let's start from the beginning. Tell us about that night at the Blue Sea restaurant." Sophia took a deep breath and began to speak. She recounted every detail, How she had worked a double shift because a co-worker was sick. How her feet were already swollen before Sebastian Duarte arrived. The way he ignored her while she waited standing. The constant changes in his order. The final humiliation in front of all the diners. How did you feel in that moment? Carolina asked. Small, Sophia admitted, feeling tears beginning to accumulate in her eyes. As if I didn't matter. As if my pregnancy was something to be ashamed of, when in reality it's the most beautiful thing that has happened to me. Tell us about your baby. When is he due? In 3 months. Sophia smiled involuntarily, caressing her belly. It's a boy. I still haven't decided on his name, but... Her voice broke slightly. But he will be loved. That I'm clear about. I understand you're a single mother. Can you tell us about that? Sophia hesitated. This was the part she had feared, the part that felt too personal, but her mother's words resonated in her mind. Tell your story in your own words. The baby's father. We separated when I told him about the pregnancy. He didn't want to be part of this. He left debts in my name and disappeared. She paused, carefully choosing the next words. At first I felt devastated. I thought I needed someone else to do this. But I learned that strength doesn't always come from having company. Sometimes it comes from within, from knowing you're doing the right thing even though it's difficult. You work at the restaurant, but you also study. Is that right? I'm in my 3rd year of nursing at the State University. Pride was evident in Sophia's voice. I had to take a break this semester because of the pregnancy and work, but I plan to resume classes in January after the baby is born. That's admirable, Carolina said, and for the first time her professionalism gave way to genuine emotion. Working, studying, preparing to be a single mother. How do you do it? Sophia laughed, but it was a sad laugh. I don't always do it well. There are nights when I cry from exhaustion, days when I wonder if I can make it. But then I feel my baby move, and I remember why all this is worth it. You've received a lot of support since the video went viral, but also criticism. Some people say you're exaggerating the situation. What would you say to them? Sophia looked directly at the camera, her honey-colored eyes shining with fierce determination. I would tell them that, until they've been in my position, until they've worked 16 hours with swollen feet and an aching body, until they've been treated as if they were invisible, they have no right to judge. I'm not seeking pity. I just want dignity. All workers deserve dignity whether they're pregnant or not. The interview continued for 40 more minutes. Carolina asked about Sophia's relationship with her mother, about her dreams for the future, about how she planned to balance motherhood with finishing her studies. My mother is my hero, Sophia said at one point. She worked her whole life at hard jobs, sometimes in terrible conditions, just to make sure I had opportunities she never had. Every time I think about giving up, I think about her and all the sacrifices she made. I can't disappoint her. Is she here today? She's working. Sophia smiled sadly. Night shift at the coastal hotels. But she sent me a message before I came. She told me, "Keep your head up, my love, you're stronger than you think." When the interview ended and the cameras turned off, Carolina approached Sophia and took her hand. "You're extraordinary," she told her in a low voice. "Your story is going to touch many hearts." Sophia wasn't so sure, but she nodded politely and left the studio. She had no idea that the interview would be viewed by more than 2 million people that night, or that clips would circulate on social networks for days. She didn't know that one of those people would be Valentina Herrera de Duarte, who would watch it alone in the living room of her mansion, tears running down her cheeks as she listened to this brave young woman's story. And she definitely didn't know that another person was watching, carefully taking notes. An accountant who had recently been fired by Sebastian Duarte and who had explosive secrets he was considering revealing. The storm that began with a 47-second video was about to become a hurricane. The Human Resources Archive of the Duarte Group occupied an entire basement in the corporate building downtown. Endless rows of grey filing cabinets contained decades of documents, contracts, pay sheets, performance evaluations, dismissal letters. Valentina had needed 3 days and several favors to obtain access. Officially, as the CEO's wife, she had the right to review certain corporate documents. In practice, The executive secretary had put up all kinds of obstacles until Valentina threatened to call Sebastian directly and expose everything. Now she was there, in a poorly lit basement that smelled of old paper and humidity, accompanied only by a bored security guard who checked his phone near the door. She had specifically requested files on domestic employees from the 90s, when the Duarte family still lived in the old family mansion before Sebastian built his modern palace in the hills. The corresponding filing cabinets were at the back of the basement. Valentina had to push aside cobwebs and move dusty boxes to reach them. Her hands, accustomed to expensive moisturizers and weekly manicures, were soon covered in dirt. She began reviewing the files one by one. There were dozens of names: gardeners, cooks, chauffeurs, domestic employees. Most had standard contracts, regular documented payments, letters of recommendation when they left employment. But then she found something strange: a filing cabinet marked "Special Cases, Confidential." Inside were fewer than 10 files, but each was marked with red stamps of "Private" and "Restricted." Valentina looked toward the guard, who remained absorbed in his phone, and opened the first file. The name on the folder was Elena Mendez. Valentina's heart raced. Elena Mendez. Could it be? She read quickly. Hiring date: March 15th, 1993. Position: live-in domestic employee. Responsibilities: general cleaning, care of the family's youngest son, Sebastian Duarte, then 8 years old. The pay sheets showed consistent salaries for almost 3 years. Then, abruptly, a notation dated January 2nd, 1996. Immediate dismissal, no severance. Signed, Jorge Duarte, Sebastian's father. There was no explanation, no documentation of final payments. Just one more line written by hand in blue ink. Employee refused to sign confidentiality agreement, threatened to expose irregular situations, was removed from the premises with legal warning. Valentina felt her blood freeze. She read the document 3 times to make sure she had understood correctly. Elena Mendez, Sofia Mendez's mother. The young woman from the video, the pregnant waitress Sebastian had publicly humiliated, was the daughter of the woman who had cared for Sebastian when he was a child. The pieces began to fit together in Valentina's mind with terrible clarity. Elena had worked for the Duartes. She had been abruptly dismissed without severance, apparently pregnant. The note about irregular situations suggested she had seen something, knew something the family wanted to keep hidden. And now, 30 years later, her daughter had been humiliated by the same child she had cared for. Valentina searched for more files. She found 5 other similar cases. Maria Sotomayor, cook, dismissed in 1989 while 5 months pregnant. No severance. Carmen Reyes, nanny, dismissed in 1991. The note said, requested maternity leave, dismissed before being able to use her rights. Rosa Delgado, cleaning employee, 1997. Dismissed at 7 months pregnant. The notation, low performance due to physical condition, replaced. All women, all pregnant, all dismissed without the benefits legally owed to them. The Duarte family had built part of their fortune systematically exploiting vulnerable workers, dismissing them, before having to pay maternity leaves, social benefits, or severances. Valentina photographed each page with trembling hands. She needed evidence. She needed proof of what she had discovered. When she finished, she carefully closed the filing cabinets and headed for the exit. The guard barely looked up when she passed. That night, Valentina didn't return to the mansion. Instead, she booked a room at a downtown hotel, an anonymous place where she could think without Sebastian's suffocating presence. Sitting on the bed with her laptop, she began researching labor laws from the 90s. She discovered that, even then, dismissing a pregnant woman without justified cause was illegal. Companies were obligated to pay severances, leaves, benefits. The Duartes had systematically violated the law. Valentina thought about all the elegant dinners she had attended, all the praise she had heard about the model business family, all the charity galas where the Duartes donated generous amounts to appear as philanthropists. It had all been a lie, an elaborate theater to hide decades of exploitation. She reviewed again the photos she had taken of the files. She stopped at Elena Mendez's. According to the document, she was 23 years old when dismissed, the same age Sophia was now, pregnant, alone, without resources. History was repeating itself, only this time the world was watching. Valentina took her phone and searched for Carolina Vega's number. The journalist had left her card after the interview with Sophia, inviting anyone with relevant information to contact her. She wrote a message. "I have information about the Duarte family that the public needs to know. Can we meet tomorrow? In private. It's urgent." The response arrived in less than 5 minutes. "Who are you?" Valentina hesitated only a moment before writing, "Someone who was blind for a long time, but now I see clearly." Sophia's apartment had begun to fill with flowers. They arrived at all hours. Bouquets of roses, lily arrangements, sunflowers in improvised vases. Some came with signed cards, messages of support from strangers who had seen her story. Others were anonymous, just beautiful flowers without explanation. Sophia placed them wherever she could, on the kitchen table, on the windowsill next to her bed. The small, modest apartment had been transformed into an unexpected garden, filling the air with sweet fragrances that contrasted with the usual smell of reheated food and cheap cleaning products. Her mother, Elena, looked at the flowers with a mixture of amazement and concern. "Daughter, this is a lot," she said one afternoon, moving a large vase to make space on the kitchen counter. "I know," Sophia responded, sitting on the sofa with her feet elevated, following her doctor's instructions to reduce swelling. "It's strange, isn't it? A week ago, nobody knew my name. Now there are people sending me flowers." "It's not just flowers," Elena said softly. "It's what they represent. Hope, solidarity. People who see your strength and want you to know you're not alone." Sophia touched her belly, where the baby had been particularly active that day. "Sometimes I wonder if I did the right thing doing that interview. Exposing myself like that, exposing our story." Eleanor sat next to her daughter, taking her hand. "Do you know how many times I've wanted to tell my own story?" she asked, her voice loaded with contained emotion. "How many times I swallowed humiliation, accepted mistreatment, kept silent because I thought I had no other option." "Mom, no, let me finish." Eleanor squeezed Sophia's hand. "I worked for families who treated me as if I were invisible. I cleaned houses of people who never learned my name. And when I got pregnant with you, the family I worked for dismissed me without a second thought. They left me with nothing." "Why did you never tell me the details?" Sophia asked. "You always said you had to look for another job, but you never explained why." Elena looked out the window, her eyes lost in distant memories. "Because I was ashamed. Ashamed of having been so naive, of having trusted people who only saw me as disposable labor. But seeing you now, keeping your head up, refusing to be invisible, makes me think that maybe I kept silent when I should have screamed. It's not your fault, Mum. The system was designed to silence you. Maybe." Eleanor turned to look directly at her daughter. "But you're changing that system, Sophia. Every person who sees your story and decides to treat workers better. Every boss who thinks twice before humiliating an employee. Every single mother who finds courage in your example. You're making a difference." Sophia felt tears accumulating in her eyes. "I just wanted to work in peace, earn money for my baby. I didn't ask to be the face of any movement." "Great stories rarely begin with someone seeking them," Eleanor said wisely. "They begin with ordinary people who refuse to accept the unacceptable." The apartment doorbell rang. Elena got up to open it and found a delivery person with another bouquet of flowers, this one particularly large and elaborate. "Sophia Mendez?" the delivery person asked. "Yes, come in," Elena said, stepping aside. The man left the arrangement on the table and left. Elena searched for a card among the flowers, white roses intertwined with perfumed lilies. The card said simply, "For Sophia, your dignity is priceless. Never forget it. A friend who understands more than you imagine." There was no signature, but there was something in the words, in the careful choice of dignity and priceless, that made the card feel different from the others. Sophia read it several times, trying to decipher who could have sent it. "A friend who understands more than you imagine," she repeated aloud. "Who could it be? Elena looked at the flowers with a thoughtful expression. Someone who has been in your position, or someone close to the person who hurt you and is now seeing things clearly. Sophia carefully stored the card in her nightstand drawer, along with the others she had found especially meaningful. She had no way of knowing that those flowers had been sent by Valentina Herrera de Duarte, who had ordered them from her hotel room, writing the card with tears in her eyes. The following days brought more changes. Sophia received job offers from 3 different restaurants, all promising better conditions and flexible hours for her pregnancy. A local radio program invited her to speak about the rights of pregnant workers. A non-profit organization dedicated to single mothers offered her free childcare help once the baby was born. But threats also arrived. Anonymous messages on social networks accusing her of being an opportunist. Emails suggesting she had orchestrated the entire incident. Even a physical letter sent to her address, which scared her because it meant someone had found out where she lived, warning her to stop seeking attention or face consequences. Sophia reported the threats to the police, but the officer who took her statement was not encouraging. "Unless they're specific death threats, there's not much we can do," he told her with a bored tone. "It's the price of being famous, I suppose." "I don't want to be famous," Sophia responded with frustration. "I just want to feel safe." That night, unable to sleep, Sophia sat by her apartment window, looking at the illuminated city. The lights of buildings flickered like earthly stars, each representing lives that continued regardless of what was happening in hers. She placed her hands on her belly. "I don't know what kind of world awaits you, little one," she whispered. "Sometimes it's cruel, sometimes it's unfair. But there are also anonymous flowers. There are people who care even though they don't know you. There's hope in the most unexpected places." The baby kicked, as if responding to her voice. Sophia smiled in the darkness. She didn't know what would come next. She didn't know that Valentina Herrera de Duarte was about to make public the information she had discovered. She didn't know that a fired accountant was compiling evidence of financial fraud. She didn't know that her story was about to cross from the personal to the political, from the individual to the systemic. All she knew was that she had started something she couldn't control. And somehow, amid the uncertainty and fear, that felt strangely good. The Grand Hall of the Costanera Hotel was the local elite's favorite place for charity events. With its enormous crystal chandeliers, Italian marble floors, and windows offering panoramic ocean views, it was the perfect stage for wealthy people to display their supposed generosity while drinking $500 champagne. Tonight, Sebastian Duarte had organized a charity event to support pregnant women in vulnerable situations. The irony wasn't lost on anyone who had seen the viral video, but his public relations team had insisted it was the best way to control the damage to his reputation. "It's the perfect move," his image consultant had told him, a thin man in an expensive suit with a calculating smile. "We donate a generous amount publicly, you give an emotional speech about the importance of supporting future mothers, and the press focuses on your redemption instead of the video." Sebastian had agreed, though every cell in his body resisted the idea of apologizing, even indirectly. But the numbers didn't lie. He had lost 3 important contracts in the last week, and 2 business partners had indefinitely postponed scheduled meetings. The scandal was costing him millions. Now, standing on the Grand Hall stage in front of almost 300 guests, Sebastian adjusted the microphone and began his rehearsed speech. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us in this noble cause." His voice resonated with a sincerity practiced in front of the mirror for hours. "As a businessman and member of this community, I have come to understand that we all have the responsibility to support the most vulnerable among us." From her table near the stage, Valentina watched her husband with a mixture of nausea and fascination. She knew that voice, that calculated expression of empathetic concern. She had seen him use the same technique to close deals, to manipulate investors, to present a version of himself that didn't really exist. Next to her, empty, was the chair where Sebastian should have been sitting before going up on stage. They had arrived together in the car, but hadn't exchanged more than cold courtesies. He didn't know she had spent the last few days investigating, gathering evidence, preparing to do something that would change their lives forever. That's why tonight I proudly announce that the Duarte Group will donate $100,000 to the Mothers of Tomorrow Foundation, dedicated to supporting pregnant women who need medical, educational, and financial assistance. Applause filled the hall. Local television cameras captured the moment. Sebastian smiled, that billboard smile that didn't reach his eyes. "And I want to say something more," he continued, raising a hand to silence the applause. "We all make mistakes. We all have moments when we don't act in the best way. What's important is to learn, grow, and work to be better." He didn't mention Sophia by name. He didn't apologize directly. But the implication was there, wrapped in corporate language carefully calibrated to admit the minimum while seeming to admit much. Valentina felt something break inside her. She stood up. The movement was so abrupt that people at nearby tables turned to look at her. Sebastian, in the middle of his speech, stopped when he saw his wife stand. "Valentina, what?" She walked toward the stage with firm steps, her high heels echoing in the sudden silence that had fallen over the hall. The cameras turned to follow her, the cameramen instinctively detecting that something dramatic was about to happen. "Excuse me, Mr. Duarte," Valentina said when she reached the stage, her voice amplified by the microphone he was holding. "May I say a few words?" Sebastian looked at her with barely disguised alarm. He knew his wife well enough to recognize that expression on her face. Pure determination, with no room for negotiation. "Valentina, this isn't the time to—" "Oh, I think it's exactly the time." She took the microphone from his hand before he could react and turned to the audience. "Good evening, everyone. My name is Valentina Herrera de Duarte. I'm the wife of the man you just applauded." Nervous murmurs ran through the hall. "I came here tonight thinking I would see my husband do something noble, something genuine, but instead I see a performance. A show designed to clean his image without really addressing the underlying problem." "Valentina, please," Sebastian hissed, trying to recover the microphone. She took a step back, keeping it out of his reach. "During the last few days, I've been investigating. I've discovered things about the Duarte family that have kept me awake at night." She took her phone out of her handbag and held it up. "I have here documents showing that my husband's family has a 30-year history of dismissing pregnant women without paying them their legal rights." The murmur turned into shocked exclamations. Reporters went on high alert, cameras focusing more intensely. "This isn't an isolated incident," Valentina continued, her voice trembling slightly but remaining firm. "It's a pattern of behavior. A system of exploitation that has destroyed lives for decades." Sebastian had gone pale. He tried to reach for the microphone again, but Valentina moved away. "And there's something else everyone should know." She paused, breathing deeply. "The young woman my husband publicly humiliated, Sofia Mendez, her mother worked for the Duarte family 30 years ago. Her mother was one of the women dismissed while pregnant, without severance, without rights." The hall exploded in heated conversations. Sebastian grabbed Valentina's arm forcefully. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he hissed in her ear. "The right thing," she responded, looking directly into his eyes. "Something I should have done years ago." At that moment, from the back of the hall, an elderly but clear voice rose. "It's true, it's all true." Everyone turned to see an older woman standing by one of the back tables. She had grey hair pulled back in a simple bun, wore a modest coat that contrasted dramatically with the designer dresses filling the hall. Her eyes, deep and honey-colored, like those of a certain young woman known throughout the country, shone with tears and determination. It was Elena Mendez. Carolina Vega, the journalist who had been covering the event, immediately recognized Sofia's mother from the research she had been doing. She signaled her cameraman to focus on the woman. Elena began walking toward the front of the hall. The crowd parted to let her pass, creating a silent path. "My name is Elena Mendez," she said when she arrived near the stage, her voice clear despite the absence of a microphone. 30 years ago, I worked as a domestic employee in the Duarte family mansion. I cared for that child." She pointed at Sebastian. "I rocked him to sleep when he had nightmares. I cleaned every corner of that house 12 hours a day, 6 days a week." Tears began falling down her face, but her voice didn't falter. When I discovered I was pregnant with my daughter, Mr. Jorge Duarte dismissed me immediately. He didn't pay me what he owed me. He threatened to ruin my reputation if I spoke. He left me on the street, alone, without resources, carrying a life in my womb. The silence in the hall was absolute. Even the waiters had stopped, trays in hand, to listen. That baby was Sophia, my daughter. The young woman that man, she pointed at Sebastian again, humiliated 2 weeks ago without even recognizing her. He was the child I cradled, that I fed, that I protected. And he grew up to become someone who treats working people like disposable trash, just like his father. Sebastian abruptly descended from the stage, trying to escape, but reporters immediately surrounded him, launching questions that overlapped one another. Is what Mrs. Mendez says true? Did you know who Sophia was when you humiliated her? Do you have any comment on your wife's accusations? Will the Duarte Group answer for the exploited workers? Sebastian pushed through the crowd without responding, his face a mask of fury and panic. Valentina watched him leave and felt a strange sensation of relief mixed with sadness. Her marriage had officially ended at that moment, in front of 300 people and a dozen cameras. She descended from the stage and walked toward Elena Mendez. The two women, separated by generation and social class, but united by experiences of injustice, looked at each other. I'm sorry, Valentina said simply. I'm sorry for everything my in-laws did to you. Elena took Valentina's hands between hers, roughened by decades of hard work. You did the right thing tonight. That's what matters. Carolina Vega approached with her cameraman. Mrs. Mendez, Mrs. Duarte, would you be willing to give an interview? The country needs to hear this. The two women exchanged a glance and nodded simultaneously. The truth, after 30 years buried, was finally seeing the light. While the charity event scandal dominated national news, another bomb was about to explode. Roberto Salinas had been the Duarte Group's chief accountant for 8 years. He was a meticulous man, 52 years old, who had dedicated his career to keeping the company's books impeccable. He lived for numbers, for the perfect order of spreadsheets, for the satisfaction of everything balancing exactly. That's why it bothered him so much when something didn't balance. He had begun noticing irregularities 6 months ago, small things at first, donations to charitable organizations that appeared in the records, but when he called to confirm receipt of funds, the organizations had no record of having received anything. Phantom employees who appeared on the payroll, but whom nobody in the company knew or had ever seen. Roberto had done what he was supposed to do, document the irregularities and report them to his superior, who turned out to be Sebastian Duarte himself. The meeting had been brief and terrifying. Roberto, Sebastian had told him with a dangerously soft voice, I appreciate your diligence. But there are aspects of the business that are above your level of responsibility. Aspects you don't need to understand or question. Mr. Duarte, with all due respect, as chief accountant, it's literally my job to understand and question financial irregularities. Audit laws require that. Laws. Sebastian had laughed without humor. Do you know how many lawyers I have on payroll? How many auditors I've paid to look the other way? Your concern for laws is admirable but naive. Roberto felt his stomach turn. Are you asking me to ignore these irregularities? I'm telling you to value your career, your reputation. Sebastian had leaned forward. An accountant dismissed for poor performance will have difficulties finding work in this city, especially if certain accusations of professional incompetence circulate among the business community. The threat was clear. Roberto had 2 options, obey or be destroyed professionally. He chose a third option, obey temporarily while secretly gathering evidence. For the next 4 months, Roberto made discreet copies of compromising financial documents, emails where Sebastian ordered the creation of false invoices, spreadsheets showing how money supposedly donated to charity ended up in personal offshore accounts, contracts with phantom companies that billed for services never rendered. Each piece of evidence he stored on a USB drive he kept hidden at home. Then came the incident with Sophia Mendez and the viral video. Roberto watched how Sebastian treated that pregnant young woman and recognized the same casual cruelty he had experienced personally. When he finally confronted Sebastian about a particularly flagrant set of irregularities, he was fired on the spot. "Clean out your desk and leave," Sebastian had told him coldly. "And remember the confidentiality agreement you signed. If you talk about what you saw here, I'll sue you until you don't have a penny." Roberto cleaned out his desk, but he didn't forget the USB drive hidden at his house. 3 days after the disastrous charity event, Roberto saw the joint interview of Valentina Herrera and Elena Mendez on the evening news. He listened to how these two brave women exposed decades of abuses. He saw Elena's tears when she described how they had left her with nothing, pregnant and alone. And he made a decision. He called Carolina Vega, the journalist covering the story. "I have information about Sebastian Duarte that the public needs to know," he said when she answered. "Information that goes beyond labor mistreatment. We're talking about fraud, tax evasion, embezzlement of charitable funds." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Who are you and how can I verify this information is legitimate?" "My name is Roberto Salinas. I was chief accountant of the Duarte Group for 8 years. I have documents, emails, financial records, everything backed up and verifiable." "Why did you decide to speak now?" Roberto thought about Sofia Mendez, about Elena, about Valentina, about all the people who had been hurt by the system he had helped keep running with his perfectly ordered spreadsheets. "Because I kept silent too long. It's time for the complete truth to be known." The interview aired 3 days later. Carolina Vega had meticulously verified each document Roberto provided, working with a team of financial investigators to confirm their authenticity. Roberto appeared on camera, dressed in a simple suit, his face showing the tension of someone who knows they're burning all their bridges. "The Duarte Group has been involved in systematic fraudulent practices for at least the last decade," he said with a firm voice. "We're talking about millions of dollars diverted from charitable donations to personal accounts, false invoices to phantom companies, large-scale tax evasion." Carolina displayed documents on screen while Roberto explained each irregularity with the precision of someone who had lived immersed in those numbers for years. "And the phantom employees?" Carolina asked. "A classic payroll inflation tactic. False identities are created in the system. They're paid salaries that go directly to accounts controlled by company executives. On paper, it looks like the company has more employees than it really does, which allows justifying certain expenses and receiving improper tax deductions. How much money would you estimate has been diverted through these practices?" Roberto had done the calculations meticulously, conservatively, between $10 and $15 million in the last 8 years, possibly more if these practices began before my time at the company. The interview continued for almost an hour, each revelation more devastating than the last. When it ended, Roberto sat in the empty studio, the lights turning off around him. Carolina Vega approached and put a hand on his shoulder. "You did the right thing," she told him. "I know," Roberto responded, "but that doesn't make it less terrifying." He was right to be scared. The next day he received a legal summons. Sebastian Duarte was suing him for defamation, violation of confidentiality agreements, and damage to corporate reputation. The lawsuit demanded $20 million in compensation. But Roberto wasn't alone. 3 whistleblower defense organizations offered to represent him for free. A legal support fund was created online and raised over $200,000 in 2 days. And most importantly, the state prosecutor's office announced it would open a criminal investigation against the Duarte Group based on the evidence Roberto had provided. Sebastian Duarte's empire, built on decades of exploitation and fraud, was beginning to crumble. Sophia was sitting on the tiny balcony of her apartment, her bare feet propped on an extra chair, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. Her belly had grown noticeably in recent weeks. The baby would be born in less than 2 months now. Her phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Calls from lawyers offering to represent her for free in a lawsuit against Sebastian Duarte. Messages from journalists asking for follow-up interviews. Emails from charitable organizations wanting her to join their boards of directors. Even an offer from a national television program to be a guest host on an episode about labor rights. Everything had escalated so quickly. What began as a 47-second video had transformed into a national scandal involving corporate fraud, systematic labor exploitation, and the public dismantling of one of the region's most powerful business families, and she was at the center of it all. Her mother came out to the balcony with 2 cups of herbal tea. "How are you feeling, daughter?" Elena asked, sitting in the chair next to Sophia. "Overwhelmed," Sophia admitted, accepting the tea. "There are so many decisions to make, so many people waiting for me to do or say something. What do you want? Not what others expect, but what you really want." Sophia thought about the question. What did she want? Until 2 weeks ago, her desires were simple: work enough to pay her debts, finish her nursing degree, prepare for her son's birth. Now those simple goals felt almost trivial compared to the magnitude of what was happening around her. "I want justice," she finally said. "Not just for me, but for all the people who were hurt by that family. You, Mom. The other women who were dismissed pregnant, the exploited workers. Everyone deserves to have what they suffered recognized." "That's admirable," Elena said softly. "But justice can take many forms. It can be legal, it can be personal, it can be social. What form do you want it to take?" Sophia touched her belly, feeling the familiar kicks of her baby. "I want something good to come out of all this, something that lasts beyond the headlines and viral videos. Something that really changes things for people like us." That night, Sophia received an unexpected visit. Valentina Herrera de Duarte appeared at her door, without prior notice, dressed casually in jeans and a simple blouse, so different from the elegant image she projected in public. Her eyes were reddened, as if she had been crying recently. "I'm sorry to show up like this," she said when Sophia opened the door. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to see, but I needed to talk to you." Sophia hesitated. This woman was the wife of the man who had humiliated her, but she was also the woman who had exposed the truth at the charity event, who had publicly defended her mother. "Come in," she finally said, stepping aside. They sat in the small living room. Valentina looked around the modest apartment, and Sophia wondered what someone accustomed to mansions and luxuries was thinking. "I've started divorce proceedings," Valentina said without preamble, "and as part of the agreement, I'm renouncing much of the assets that would legally belong to me. Instead, I'm establishing a compensation fund for all the workers who were exploited by the Duarte family." Sophia blinked, surprised. "That's generous. But why are you telling me?" "Because I want you to be part of how that fund is administered." Valentina leaned forward. "You understand what it's like to struggle, what pregnant workers and single mothers need. I only understand money. I need someone who understands people. I don't know anything about managing funds or foundations. You'll learn, and you'll have help. Carolina Vega is interested in participating. Roberto Salinas, the accountant who exposed the fraud, has offered his services. Even your mother could be involved if she wants." Sophia felt her mind spinning, trying to process the offer. "Why are you doing this? You don't have to compensate for your ex-husband's mistakes." "I'm not just doing it for him." Valentina looked at her hands. "For 15 years, I lived in a bubble of privilege. I saw things that made me uncomfortable, but I ignored them because it was easier not to ask questions. I was complicit through my silence. This is my way of trying to make peace with that." The 2 women remained in silence for a moment. "I need to think about it," Sophia finally said. "It's a big responsibility, and I'm about to have a baby. I don't know if I can handle it all." "You don't have to decide now," Valentina responded, standing up. "Take the time you need. Here's my personal number." She left a card on the coffee table. "Call me when you're ready to talk more." When Valentina left, Sophia stared at the card for a long time. Elena entered the living room. "Did you hear everything?" Sophia asked. "Not intentionally, but these walls are thin." Elena sat next to her daughter. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet." Sophia touched her belly. "But I feel like this could be important. Not just for me, but for many other people." "Then trust that feeling," Elena said. "Your instinct hasn't failed you so far." That night, Sophia had a dream. She dreamed that her son had already been born, a small boy with her honey-colored eyes and a bright smile. In the dream, he asked her what she had done when she had the chance to help others. She woke up with absolute clarity about what she needed to do. The Duarte Group now faced multiple simultaneous investigations: fiscal, labor, tax. Each day brought new revelations about questionable practices that had gone unnoticed for years. Sebastian Duarte had secluded himself in his mansion, refusing to make public statements. His legal team worked tirelessly to contain the damage, but it was like trying to plug holes in a dam that was crumbling on all sides. Sophia observed all this from a distance with mixed feelings. On one hand, there was satisfaction in seeing that finally someone powerful was facing consequences for their behavior. On the other, she didn't feel the vengeful pleasure she thought she would. Only sadness for how many people had been hurt in the process of building that empire of lies. She had accepted Valentina's offer to participate in the compensation fund. Planning meetings were held in Sophia's living room, with Valentina, Carolina, Roberto, and Elena sitting in the small space, eating homemade sandwiches while designing the bylaws of what would be called the Labor Dignity Foundation. "We need clear criteria for who qualifies for compensation," Roberto was saying at one of these meetings, his spreadsheets spread out on the coffee table. Documentation proving they worked for the Duarte Group or its subsidiaries, evidence of dismissal during pregnancy or questionable circumstances. "But many of these women don't have documentation," Elena pointed out. "I didn't have a written contract, just verbal promises. Does that mean I wouldn't qualify?" "We could accept verified testimonies," Carolina suggested. "Interviews where other people confirm the details. It's not perfect, but it's better than excluding people just because they were exploited in a way that left no paper trail." Sophia listened to these conversations with growing confidence in the group they had formed. They were people from completely different worlds, united by the desire to do something meaningful. Meanwhile, public opinion had divided into two clear sides. One side saw Sophia as a hero, symbol of exploited workers who finally found their voice. Hashtags like Facial Justice for Sophia and Labor Dignity dominated social networks. Labor organizations cited her case in campaigns for better protections for pregnant workers. The other side saw her as an opportunist who had exploited an unfortunate moment to gain fame and money. Conspiracy theories circulated, suggesting she had deliberately provoked Sebastian Duarte, that everything had been planned to go viral, that now she was taking advantage of the situation. Cruel comments arrived daily. "This girl just wants easy money. She's probably not even really pregnant. Sebastian Duarte is a business hero. Some random waitress shouldn't be able to ruin his reputation. I bet she got pregnant on purpose to manipulate the situation." Sophia tried not to read the comments, but it was impossible to avoid them completely. Each cruel word was like a small cut, accumulating until they created a deep wound. One afternoon, after reading a particularly vicious comment suggesting she was a prostitute seeking an easy payout, Sophia closed her laptop and began to cry. The stress, exhaustion, weight of public scrutiny, everything collapsed at once. Elena found her like that, sitting on the living room floor with the laptop closed beside her, sobbing with her hands on her belly. "Daughter, what happened?" "I can't anymore, Mum," Sophia said between sobs. "It doesn't matter what I do. There will always be people who hate me, who think the worst of me. Is all this worth it? Am I really helping anyone or just hurting myself more?" Eleanor sat on the floor next to her daughter, wrapping her in her arms. "Do you remember when you were 8 years old and they bullied you at school because your clothes weren't brand name? Do you remember what I told you?" Sophia nodded against her mother's shoulder. "You said that cruel people attack others because they have pain inside them that they don't know how to handle." "Exactly. And these people who write horrible things about you are doing the same. They're projecting their own fears, their own insecurities. It has nothing to do with you, really. But it hurts just the same. Of course it hurts." Eleanor brushed the hair from her daughter's face. "But let me ask you something. The lives you're touching positively, the women who will see the foundation as hope, the workers who will feel safer speaking about abuses, are they worth more than the cruel comments from strangers?" Sophia thought about the letters she had received. Dozens of them, handwritten by women sharing their own stories of labor exploitation. Single mothers telling her that her courage had given them strength to demand better treatment. Workers thanking her for finally feeling seen. Yes, she whispered. "They're worth more." Then those are the voices you should listen to, not the noise from those who attack, because it's easier to tear down than to build. 2 days later, Sofia received a summons. Sebastián Duarte was suing her for defamation and damage to his reputation. The lawsuit was absurd. Any competent lawyer could see it had no legal merit, but that wasn't the point. The point was to intimidate her, scare her, make her retract. Sofia read the summons 3 times, feeling anxiety grow in her chest. Then she did something she hadn't done in weeks. She called the number Diego, her baby's father, had given her with instructions to never use it. He answered on the 4th ring, his voice cautious. "Sofia, I need you to know something," she said, her voice firm. "I'm going to be sued. My name is going to be in more headlines. And probably, eventually, your name will also come out as the baby's father." There was a prolonged silence. "Why are you calling to tell me this?" "Because despite everything you did to me, I don't want you to find out from the press. I'm giving you the chance to get ahead of the story if you want." Diego laughed bitterly. "Get ahead and say what? Yes, I abandoned my pregnant girlfriend after stealing thousands of dollars from her? That would ruin my life." "Ruining your life would be fair," Sofia said without emotion. "But I'm not calling for revenge. I'm calling because our son is going to grow up in a world where this story exists. And I'd rather he have an imperfect father who acknowledges his mistakes than a father who simply disappeared. What do you want me to do?" "I want you to consider being part of his life. I don't need your money. The foundation will take care of that. But our son deserves to have a father if that father is willing to make the effort to be decent." Another long silence. "I need to think about this," Diego finally said. "You have until he's born," Sofia responded. "After that, if you decide not to be present, I accept your decision. But don't come back years later wanting to be a part-time father. It's all or nothing." She hung up without waiting for a response. Eleanor, who had heard the conversation from the kitchen, entered the living room. "That was brave. Or was it stupid?" Sofia asked. "Giving him the chance to hurt my son like he hurt me." "You gave him a chance to be a better person," Elena corrected. "What he does with that chance is his responsibility, not yours." The fiscal investigation against the Duarte group had advanced faster than anyone expected. The documents Roberto Salinas provided were so detailed and organized that government auditors could follow each fraudulent transaction with crystal clarity. 3 weeks after the investigation began, the prosecutor's office announced it would file criminal charges against Sebastián Duarte for tax evasion, corporate fraud, and embezzlement of charitable funds. The news exploded in all media. Cameras camped in front of Sebastián's mansion, waiting to capture his arrest. Sofia watched the news from her apartment, now only 3 weeks from her due date. Her belly was enormous, moving was difficult, and every night she went to bed wondering if this would be the night labor would begin. "How do you feel about it?" Carolina asked, who had come to visit her to work on the final details of the foundation. "Empty," Sofia admitted. "I thought I would feel satisfaction, maybe even joy that he was finally facing justice, but I just feel empty. As if this whole situation were tragic for everyone involved, including him." "That makes you a better person than him," Carolina said. "He never felt empathy for the people he hurt. You feel it even for the person who hurt you." That afternoon, something unexpected happened. Sebastián Duarte requested a meeting with Sofia. The request came through his lawyer, a formal message asking for the opportunity to speak face-to-face, without press, without lawyers, just 2 people. Everyone advised her to refuse. Elena was furious at the mere suggestion. Valentina warned it could be a trap to manipulate her. Even Carolina, generally open to giving opportunities, thought it was a bad idea. But Sofia felt curious. What could this man who had caused so much pain want to tell her? Had he had an epiphany, or was he simply seeking one last chance to control the narrative? She agreed to meet with him, but under her conditions, in a public place, a cafe near her apartment, with her mother waiting at a nearby table and with her phone recording the conversation. Sebastián Duarte looked different when he entered the cafe. He had lost weight. His suit no longer fit him so perfectly. He had deep dark circles and his hair, usually impeccably styled, showed grey strands that had previously been dyed. It was the face of a man facing the destruction of everything he had built. He sat across from Sophia in silence, ordering only a black coffee he didn't touch. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," he finally said. "I have 5 minutes," Sophia responded. "My baby could arrive at any moment and I don't want to be stressed before delivery." Sebastian nodded, looking at the table instead of at her. "I don't know how to begin this," he admitted. "I've rehearsed a speech dozens of times, but now that I'm here, all the words sound hollow." "Why did you want to see me?" Sophia asked directly. "Because you need to know something that nobody else knows, something that changes the context of everything, though it doesn't excuse it." Sophia waited, her hand resting protectively on her belly. "Your mother, Elena Mendez," Sebastian began slowly. "She didn't just work for my family. She saved my life when I was 9 years old." Sophia blinked, confused. "What?" "I had an accident in the pool. I hit my head and fell unconscious in the water. Elena pulled me out, gave me CPR, called emergency services. The doctors said if 1 more minute had passed, I would have drowned or suffered permanent brain damage." He paused, his hands trembling slightly around the coffee cup. "My father never publicly thanked her, never gave her a bonus or recognition, because admitting that a domestic employee had saved the Duarte family heir would have been embarrassing for him. It would have implied that someone inferior had more value than him." Sophia felt something moving in her chest, an emotion she couldn't fully name. "Why did you never say anything? When you publicly humiliated her, when all this exploded, why didn't you mention that your family owed her your life?" "Because I didn't remember it," Sebastian said, and for the first time he looked directly into her eyes. "I blocked that memory. I buried it so deep that when I saw Elena at the charity event, when she told her story, I didn't make the connection. Not until 3 days later, when my therapist made me review old family albums." He took out his wallet and extracted an old photograph folded by the years. He slid it across the table toward Sophia. It was a photo of a small boy in a hospital bed smiling weakly. Next to him, a young woman of about 23 years old, her face full of relief and affection. It was Eleanor. It was her mother, 3 decades younger, holding the hand of the child she had just saved. Sophia felt tears accumulating in her eyes. "She never told me this," she whispered. "Probably because it was traumatic. Probably because my family treated her so badly afterward that any memory associated with them is painful." Sebastian breathed deeply. "I'm not telling you this to generate pity. I'm telling you because you need to understand that my cruelty toward you, toward her, wasn't just a product of arrogance. It was a product of a family system that taught me to devalue exactly the people who had given me the most." "And now what?" Sophia asked. "Do you expect this revelation to change something?" "No. I hope it helps make sense of something that seems senseless." Sebastian stood up. "I'm going to prison, probably for years. My businesses are being dismantled. My marriage ended. I've lost everything except the opportunity to finally understand who I really am." He walked toward the door, then stopped and turned. "When your baby is born, when you hold him in your arms, think about this. My mother held me the same way, probably with the same love, and somehow through years of privilege and arrogance, that love twisted until it turned me into someone capable of hurting a pregnant woman who was just trying to work honestly. Don't make my mistakes. Don't let the world turn your son into what I became." And he left. Sophia sat in silence, looking at the old photograph. Eleanor approached from her observation table. "Did you hear?" Sophia asked. "Every word." Eleanor took the photograph, her eyes filling with tears. "I didn't remember that someone had taken this photo. It was the worst day of my life up to that point, thinking that child would die in my hands. Why did you never tell me?" "Because I wanted to protect you from that family, from everything they represented." Elena returned the photo. "But maybe you needed to know that even people who hurt us have complex stories, that humanity is complicated." Sophia touched her belly, where her baby was kicking gently. "I'm not going to raise my son to hate. I'm going to raise him to understand." to understand privilege, to understand responsibility, to understand that every action has weight and consequences. Then you're already a better mother than many will ever be, Elena said, kissing her daughter's forehead. Sophia woke at 3 in the morning with a sharp pain in her abdomen. At first, she thought it was another false alarm. She had had several in recent weeks. But when the pain returned 7 minutes later, more intense, she knew it was real. "Mom," she called, her voice trembling. "Mom, I think it's time." Elena appeared in her bedroom door in seconds, already fully awake despite the hour. "How far apart are the contractions?" "The last one was 7 minutes ago." "Good, we still have time. Get dressed, I'll call a taxi." The trip to the hospital was surreal. The streets were empty at that hour, the city lights flickering in the darkness. Sophia breathed through each contraction, counting as they had taught her in childbirth preparation classes. At the hospital, they received her with professional efficiency. They took her to a room, connected her to monitors, explained the process. Everything was exactly as they had practiced, and yet completely different because now it was real. Hours passed in a confused mixture of pain, hope, fear, and anticipation. Elena never let go of her hand, whispering words of encouragement when the contractions became unbearable. "You're so strong, my love. Stronger than you think. Breathe. Just breathe." At 9 in the morning, when contractions were only 2 minutes apart, a nurse entered with unexpected news. "There's someone here who says he's the baby's father. Do you want me to let him in?" Sophia and Elena exchanged surprised looks. "Diego," Sophia said, her voice mixing disbelief with cautious hope. "Let him in." Diego entered the room nervously, carrying flowers that seemed hastily bought at the hospital shop. He looked terrified and embarrassed in equal parts. "I know I have no right to be here," he began immediately. "I know I've been the worst kind of coward. But when you called, when you said our son deserved to have a father, I haven't been able to stop thinking about that." Another contraction hit Sophia. She squeezed Elena's hand, breathing through the pain. When it passed, she looked at Diego. "If you stay," she said with a firm voice despite exhaustion, "it's forever. You can't come in and out of his life when it's convenient for you. It's all or nothing. I understand, and I want to be here. I want to be better than I've been." "Then stay," Sophia said. "But if you ever hurt him like you hurt me, you'll regret being born." Diego nodded solemnly and positioned himself on the other side of the bed, opposite Elena. The next 2 hours were the most intense of Sophia's life. The pain reached levels she didn't know existed. There were moments when she wanted to give up, moments when she screamed that she couldn't continue. "Yes, you can," Elena insisted. "You're a warrior, Sophia. You can do this." "Come on, Sophia," Diego added, his voice breaking. "You're so close, so close." And finally, at 11:47 in the morning, after one last monumental push, a baby's cry filled the room. "It's a boy," the doctor announced, placing the baby on Sophia's chest. A beautiful, healthy boy. Sophia looked at her son for the first time. He had his eyes closed, small fists waving in the air, dark hair wet against his little head. He was perfect. Absolutely perfect. Tears ran freely down her face as she held her baby against her skin. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "I've been waiting for you. Mommy has been waiting for you for so long." Elena cried openly, gently caressing the baby's head. "He looks like you when you were born," she said with a voice broken with emotion. "My beautiful grandson." Diego stood to the side, tears in his eyes too, extending a trembling finger that the baby instinctively grabbed. "I'm sorry," he said in a low voice. It wasn't clear if he was speaking to Sophia, the baby, or both. "I promise to be better. I promise to do it right." Sophia didn't respond. She didn't need to. In that moment, holding her son, surrounded by her mother and the imperfect father of her baby, everything else seemed distant and insignificant. Outside the hospital room, more visitors waited. Carolina Vega had come with a huge bouquet. Valentina had sent a basket of baby gifts and a note that said, "For the child who is already changing the world, though he doesn't know it yet." There was even a message from Roberto Salinas, who was now fully cooperating with investigations. "Congratulations on the newest and most important member of our foundation. May he grow up in a fairer world than the one we found. But in that moment, Sophia knew nothing of that. She only knew she was holding in her arms the reason she had endured everything, fought against everything, survived everything. "Have you thought of a name?" Elena asked softly. Sophia looked at her son, who had stopped crying and was now blinking at her with eyes that were just beginning to focus. "Matteo," she said. "His name will be Matteo. It means gift from God, and that's exactly what he is." 3 months later, the building housing the Labor Dignity Foundation wasn't luxurious, but it was welcoming. Located in a middle-class neighborhood, the 2-story space had been donated by a local businessman who had seen Sophia's story and wanted to contribute to the cause. The ground floor had offices for staff, a meeting room, and a reception area where workers could come to request assistance. The second floor had been converted into a resource center, computers for job searching, a small daycare so mothers could leave their children while attending interviews or training, and a counseling room where psychologists offered free support. Sophia was in the second-floor nursing room, Matteo in her arms while he fed peacefully. Through the window she could see the beach in the distance, the waves breaking in an eternal rhythm that calmed her. She had resumed her nursing studies 2 months after giving birth, taking online classes while Matteo slept. Elena took care of the baby when Sophia had to go to campus for clinical practice, and surprisingly, Diego had also kept his word. He came 3 times a week to spend time with Matteo, and although his relationship with Sophia was cordial but distant, he was building a genuine bond with his son. "Knock, knock," Carolina said from the door. "May I come in?" "Sure, come ahead." Carolina entered with a thick folder. "We have the first quarter operations report, and Sophia, the numbers are incredible." Sophia adjusted Matteo against her shoulder to burp him while listening. "In 3 months, we've helped 122 women. We've provided legal assistance to 37 facing unfair dismissals. We placed 41 in new jobs with better conditions. We offered professional training to 86. And most importantly, 18 women who were exploited by the Duarte group have received compensation. And the money, how are we financially? Better than expected. In addition to Valentina's initial fund, we've received donations from ordinary people who saw your story, not millionaires, just regular people contributing $10, $20. It adds up, and 3 local companies have signed on as corporate sponsors." Sophia smiled, kissing Matteo's head. "What about Sebastian Duarte? Any news?" "His trial starts next week. The prosecution has a solid case thanks to Roberto's documents. Most likely he'll spend several years in prison." "How do I feel about it?" Sophia reflected aloud. "I still don't completely know. Part of me feels justice is being served. Another part just feels sadness about how all those people were hurt, including him in some strange way." "That makes you human," Carolina said, "and it also makes you the perfect person to lead this foundation. Because you understand that justice isn't just punishment, it's also restoration." That afternoon, Sophia had a meeting with a 19-year-old young woman named Maria. She was 4 months pregnant and had just been dismissed from her job at a clothing store when her supervisor discovered her condition. "I don't know what to do," Maria said, tears running down her face. "I need the money. I'm alone. The baby's father doesn't want to know anything." Sophia listened to the story with a deep sense of déjà vu. It was her own story being told by another voice. "I know exactly how you feel," she said softly. "Just a year ago, I was where you are now, scared, alone, not knowing how I was going to survive. And what did you do?" "I kept going, one day at a time, sometimes 1 hour at a time, and I asked for help when I needed it, even though it was hard to admit I needed it." "Did it get better? Did things really get better?" Sophia looked at Matteo, who was sleeping peacefully in his stroller next to her desk. "Not in the way I expected. There were twists I never imagined, but yes, it got better. Not because my life became perfect, but because I learned that strength isn't not being afraid. It's being afraid and moving forward anyway." Maria dried her tears. "Can the foundation help me?" "We can help you file a labor complaint against your employer. We can connect you with free prenatal services. We can offer you training for new professional skills, and we can provide you with a place where you're not alone, where there are people who understand what you're going through. Why do you do all this? Sophia smiled. Because someone should have done it for me, for my mother, for all the women who were silenced and exploited. We can't change the past, but we can change the future for people like you. When Maria left, with a folder full of resources and an expression of hope she didn't have when she arrived, Sophia felt something deep settle in her chest. Purpose. This was purpose. That night, back in her apartment, Sophia sat on the balcony with Matteo in her arms. Elena was in the kitchen preparing dinner, and Diego would come soon for his evening visit. The baby looked at the emerging stars with big, curious eyes. "Someday, when you're older," Sophia told him softly, "I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to tell you how you were born in the middle of a storm we didn't create, but that we changed with our presence in it." Matteo gurgled, his little hand grabbing his mother's finger. "I'm going to tell you about your grandmother, the strongest woman you'll ever know, who saved a life only to be betrayed by that person's family. I'm going to tell you how a 47-second video changed the course of many lives, including yours." The baby closed his eyes, beginning to fall asleep with his mother's gentle rocking. "But above all, I'm going to teach you something I learned through all this, that dignity isn't something someone can give you or take from you. It's something you carry inside you, and nobody, no matter how powerful, can steal it from you unless you let them." Eleanor appeared in the balcony doorway. "Dinner's ready, daughter." "We're coming, Mum." Sophia stood up, holding Matteo against her chest. She looked toward the illuminated city, toward the dark ocean beyond, toward the vast world her son would one day explore. She had begun this journey as a pregnant waitress trying to survive. She was ending it as a mother, student, founder of an organization that changed lives, and most importantly, as someone who had learned that true strength doesn't come from never falling, but from getting up every time you fall. The humiliation she had experienced that night at Blue Sea felt like something from another life now. The pain had been real, deep, transformative, but it had also been the catalyst for something much bigger than herself. As she entered the apartment, where her mother was setting the table, and soon the imperfect father of her son would arrive, Sophia felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: peace. Not the peace of a life without problems, but the peace that comes from knowing that no matter what challenges came, she had the strength to face them. That her son would grow up seeing that justice was possible, that change was possible, that even in the darkest moments there was hope. She placed Matteo in his crib, gently kissing his forehead. "Sweet dreams, my love. Tomorrow is another day to change the world, but for now, just rest." And in that simple moment, in that modest apartment with her imperfect but present family around her, Sophia Mendez understood something fundamental. A millionaire's pride had been destroyed not by revenge, but by truth. And from those ruins, something more valuable than any business empire had grown: restored dignity, justice served, and renewed hope for all those who had ever been made to feel invisible. That was her victory. Not over a man, but over a system that for too long had allowed power to crush the vulnerable. And it was just the beginning.